In the small, quiet town of Riverside, there was a house that no one wanted to go near. The Anders family, new to the town, thought they had found the perfect home on the edge of the woods, but they didn't know something dark was waiting for them. It started with a dog big, black, with glowing yellow eyes, and soon strange things began to happen. As the fear grew stronger, the family realized too late that some secrets are better left alone. The small town of Riverside had always been quiet. Nestled among rolling hills and thick woods, it was a place where life moved at a calm and predictable pace. People knew their neighbors, doors were rarely locked, and children played freely in the streets. The arrival of the Anders family didn't disrupt the balance much. They were an unassuming trio: Mark, a freelance writer; Rosie, a stay-at-home mom; and their 7-year-old son, Rahib. Their new home, a modest house at the edge of town, bordered the woods. Its backyard stretched into a dense canopy of trees that seemed alive with the rustling of leaves and chirping of unseen creatures. Rahib, being curious, often wandered near the woods, despite his parents' warnings to stay close. The first time the dog appeared, it was during one of those backyard explorations. Rahib had been tossing a ball near the tree line when the dog emerged. It was large, with shaggy black fur and piercing yellow eyes. Something about its stare was unsettling, as if it could see straight into a person's soul. But to Rahib, it was just a dog, and he was thrilled. The animal didn't bark or growl. It just stood there watching. Rahib called out to it, but the dog didn't move. Then, without warning, it turned and disappeared into the woods. That night, Rahib told his parents about the dog. They dismissed it as a stray and warned him to be careful. The dog began appearing more frequently. Each time it stood at the edge of the woods, motionless. Rahib would wave, sometimes even talk to it, but it never responded. Despite its unsettling demeanor, Rahib was drawn to it. He started leaving scraps of food near the trees, hoping to coax it closer. One evening, as twilight draped the town in shadows, Rahib placed a piece of bread near the woods. He sat on the grass, waiting for the dog to appear. Minutes turned to hours, and just as he was about to give up, he saw the familiar black shape. The dog approached the bread slowly, its movements eerily deliberate. Rahib watched, mesmerized. As the dog ate, something changed. Its yellow eyes seemed to glow brighter, and the air around it grew colder. Rahib felt a chill run down his spine. The dog looked at him, and for the first time it growled. It was low and guttural, a sound that didn't seem entirely animal. The following days were marked by strange occurrences. Rahib started having vivid nightmares of the dog standing at the foot of his bed, its glowing eyes fixed on him. His parents noticed he was becoming withdrawn and pale. When asked, he simply said he wasn't feeling well. Objects in the house began moving on their own. A toy car rolled across the floor without anyone touching it. Picture frames fell from walls, and strange claw marks appeared on the doors. The family tried to rationalize these events, blaming drafts or faulty fixtures, but deep down, they were unsettled. One night, Rahib woke up screaming. His parents rushed to his room to find him sitting upright, drenched in sweat. He told them the dog had been in his room watching him. Mark and Rosie tried to comfort him, but the fear in his eyes was unmistakable. The next morning they found muddy paw prints leading from the backyard, across the living room, and into Rahib's room. There were no signs of a break-in, and the windows were locked from the inside. Rahib's condition worsened. He spoke less, ate little, and spent most of his time staring out the window toward the woods. The dog continued to appear, but now it seemed bolder. It would come closer to the house, its glowing eyes visible even from inside. One afternoon, Rosie found Rahib sitting in the backyard, muttering under his breath. When she asked what he was doing, he said he was talking to the dog. But there was no dog in sight. She pulled him inside, her unease growing. That night, Mark decided to investigate. Armed with a flashlight, he ventured into the woods where the dog always appeared. The air was thick and still, and the beam of light barely penetrated the darkness. He called out, but only silence answered. Then he heard it a growl, deep and resonant. The flashlight flickered, and for a brief moment Mark saw them, two glowing yellow eyes staring at him from the darkness. He stumbled back, his heart racing. The growl grew louder, more menacing. Mark ran back to the house, vowing never to enter those woods again. As the days passed, the family began hearing whispers at night. They couldn't make out the words, but the tone was chilling. The dog was no longer just a presence in the backyard. It felt as though it had become a part of their home. One evening, Rosie found Rahib's bed empty. Panicking, she woke Mark and they searched the house. The back door was ajar, and muddy paw prints led out into the woods. They ran outside, calling Rahib's name. The woods were dark and unwelcoming, but they pushed forward, guided by the faint sound of rustling leaves. As they reached a clearing, they froze. Rahib stood in the center, his small figure dwarfed by the towering trees. The dog was beside him, its yellow eyes glowing brighter than ever. Around them the air shimmered as if alive. Mark and Rosie tried to move, to call out, but they were paralyzed by an unseen force. The dog turned its gaze to them, and for a moment they felt an overwhelming wave of fear and despair. Then, everything went dark. When they woke up, they were back in their home. Rahib's bed was empty, and the dog was gone. They searched for days, calling the police and organizing search parties, but there was no trace of their son. The town was shaken by Rahib's disappearance. Rumors spread about the strange events at the Anders house and the mysterious dog in the woods. Some believed it was a wild animal, while others whispered about curses and supernatural forces. The Anders eventually moved away, unable to bear the memories of what had happened. The house remained empty, its windows boarded up. The woods, once a place of innocent exploration, became a forbidden zone, avoided by all. However, curiosity has a way of drawing people in. Years later, a group of teenagers decided to explore the old Anders house. Armed with flashlights and cameras, they entered the decaying building. They laughed nervously as they wandered through the rooms, joking about the stories they'd heard. The house was silent, the floorboards creaking under their weight. The air inside was thick with dust, and the walls were stained with the remnants of long-forgotten memories. As they moved through the rooms, their laughter echoed off the walls, masking the tension that seemed to cling to the space. In Rahib's room, they stopped. The atmosphere felt different here, heavier, as if the room itself was holding its breath. One of the teens, a girl named Mia, ran her fingers over the claw marks on the walls. "This is it, guys," she said, a mocking tone in her voice. "This is where it all happened, the haunted room." They all laughed nervously, trying to shake off the growing unease that hung over them. But then the temperature dropped, and their breath became visible in the air. The lights from their flashlights flickered. A low growl, distant at first, began to reverberate through the room. They froze. What was that? Someone whispered. The growl grew louder, and the air seemed to hum with an unnatural energy. The cameras captured the tension, the shifting shadows that moved with a mind of their own. The door slammed shut with a deafening bang, trapping them inside. Mia's heart raced. "We need to leave. Now." But before they could react, the growl escalated into a roar, and a pair of glowing yellow eyes appeared in the corner of the room. The dog, the same one from the stories, was there, standing in the shadows, its eyes burning with an otherworldly intensity. It wasn't alone. Behind it, figures began to emerge, indistinct shapes that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. They were faceless, their forms made of shadows, yet there was an undeniable presence of malevolence surrounding them. The room pulsed with an ominous energy, and the temperature plummeted further, each breath feeling like ice in their lungs. "Run!" One of the teens screamed, but their bodies refused to obey. They were rooted to the spot, unable to move, as if the air itself was holding them in place. The dog took a step forward, its eyes never leaving them. Then, it began to growl again, the sound vibrating in their bones. The figures behind it started to move, closing in on them. It was as if the house had come alive, feeding off their fear. In a panic, one of the teens managed to break free of the invisible force and sprinted for the window. But as they reached it, the glass shattered, and they were yanked back by something unseen. A cold, clammy hand gripped their ankle, pulling them toward the dog. The others screamed as they watched their friend struggle, but there was nothing they could do. The dog's yellow eyes locked onto them, and in that moment they understood. This was no ordinary creature. It was a guardian, an enforcer of the curse that had bound the house to the woods. And it wasn't letting them leave. The shadows grew closer, and one by one, the teenagers were dragged into the darkness, their screams swallowed by the oppressive silence of the house. The camera dropped to the floor, its lens capturing only the fading glow of the yellow eyes. Days later, the town of Riverside was once again shaken. News of the missing teens spread quickly, but despite numerous search efforts, no trace of them was ever found. The police investigated the house, but they too felt the weight of something unnatural in the air. Every officer who entered came out with a look of terror in their eyes, unable to explain what they had witnessed. The Anders house, now more notorious than ever, was abandoned once again. The woods remained an untouched labyrinth, and the dog's presence lingered, its yellow eyes watching from the darkness, waiting for the next curious soul to wander too close. Years passed, and the story of the haunted house became little more than a ghost tale, told around campfires and late-night gatherings. But those who remembered, those who had dared to come too close, would never forget the presence that lurked in the woods, the dog with the glowing eyes, and the curse that would never be broken.